Presenting old Ford cars that time forgot. 1942 Ford Super Deluxe Convertible. You may rightfully ask who could ever forget about an old Ford convertible. After all, what's not to like? There's a really good answer, and it's a little old thing called the Second World War. When the United States pivoted from isolationist nation to active participant in December of 1941, its industrial base was transformed, literally overnight, into a war machine. For its part, Ford built the Willow Run factory where it cranked out 650 B-24 bombers per month. It wouldn't be until the 1946 model year when Ford would start building civilian cars again, but you could consider yourself lucky if you were one of the 2,920 people who nabbed one of Ford's 1942 Super Deluxe convertibles, the least common model for the truncated model year. 1954 Ford Crestline Skyliner. You can't have a 120-year history as a successful automaker if you have too many failures, and finding those can be hard for a brand like Ford, but they're out there to discover if you dig. With the 1954 Ford Crestline Skyliner, it was the auto industry's first expression of the now popular moonroof option, but the Skyliner was priced identically to Ford's Sunliner, a convertible, which was far more popular. The plexiglass roof cast a strange glow over the interior, and without modern air conditioning, it could get wicked hot inside. Just 13,344 Skyliners were sold in 1954, and by 1955 the Ford Skyliner was gone. When a similar arrangement with a plexiglass roof came to the 1955 Fairlane Crown Victoria, it too was far less popular than the steel roof model, with only 1,999 sold. Though the moonroof would eventually become a prized option, that would not happen until efficient air conditioning became mainstream. 1957 Ford Business Sedan. Anyone with the most modest knowledge of cars and American history knows that 1957 was a banner year for the U.S. auto industry, and Detroit's big automakers all had huge success that year, Ford included. Sales for Ford's redesigned 1957 model were solid, with 1.7 million cars sold versus Chevy's 1.5 million, and to a lesser degree the 57 Plymouth, with its futuristic-looking fins that would capture the nation's automotive imagination for the decades to come. At Ford, Bob McNamara's preference for designing and building utilitarian transportation mimicked the Model T from decades before. But unlike the Model T, it had to compete with spicier-looking models at similar prices. This, coupled with the fact that the 1957 Ford had structural weaknesses and its roof was prone to rusting out, meant that not many would survive, and those that did would be considered less desirable than same-year Chevys and Dodges. A mild recession in 58 and 59 was followed by the installation of Lee Iacocca at Ford's helm in 1960, and a return to style and performance. 1958 Edsel Citation. Edsel Ford was the first and only son of Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company. Edsel often played the role of devil's advocate with his father, and leaned into a stiff headwind for some of Ford's best ideas, such as the Model A, the flathead V8, and by creating the entire Mercury brand in 1939. Nevertheless, Edsel Ford died of cancer in 1943, 15 years before the Ford division bearing his name was founded in 1958. Ironically, it is the eponymous brand name that Edsel Ford is most commonly known for, the failure of which he would have no control over. Though the upscale Edsel car line of 1958 to 1960 provided a lot of value and style for the money, its timing into the market corresponded perfectly with an economic recession that spelled doom for the brand. As a result, the name Edsel is synonymous with commercial failure. A look at the final 1960 Edsel model showed what the brand's future could have been under the unique stylistic guidance of Elwood Engel, who would move to Chrysler after the rise of Eugene Bourdonnais in 1961. One silver lining to the Edsel story: the extra manufacturing capacity that had been added for Edsel production was instrumental in making the 1959 Ford Falcon a huge success. 1975 Ford Granada Sport Coupe. The U.S. auto industry of the 1970s and 1980s was in a tumultuous time as manufacturers scrambled to react to the twin problems of a fuel shortage and the flood of fuel-efficient imports. Each of the big four manufacturers developed smaller cars that combined better fuel economy with the perceived need for luxury and comfort. At Chrysler, there was the Dodge Aspen and the Plymouth Volare. At GM, there was the midsize Monte Carlo and Malibu. American Motors had the Concorde, and at Ford, there was the Granada. The Granada was inspired by the proportions of the Mercedes-Benz, and in Sport Coupe version was a well-proportioned car which, when combined with its available small block V8s, can make for an expressive and unique hot rod. Nevertheless, the Granada, unlike its GM and Mopar cohorts, has largely been forgotten by today's hot rodders for no apparent reason. 1977 Ford Maverick Stallion. With Ford's new truck-based Maverick on our doorstep, the public, or at least the internet, is on the verge of forgetting about the original compact Maverick passenger car of 1970 to 77.
And now, into the select circle of the world's great performance cars comes Ford's Maverick.
Did you say Maverick?
You gotta be kidding.
Come on. Maverick.
Yes, Ford's new Maverick Grabber. Does the Grabber belong with these performance cars? Well, yes and no. No, it doesn't have a monster engine. No, it doesn't have a monster price. No, it doesn't have high insurance rates, and it doesn't use premium gas. But yes, you do get wild Grabber colors.
Designed to continue in the tradition of Ford's original compact, the Falcon, the Maverick competed successfully with an invasion of imports. Even when the Granada was introduced to replace the Maverick in 1975, the Maverick was so popular that Ford decided to produce the two cars side by side through the 1977 model year. With fuel efficiency and household operating costs being far more important than performance throughout the Maverick's production, you'd think the Maverick would avoid such pretensions. But in 1977, Ford offered the Maverick Stallion option on the two-door Maverick sedan. The sports-minded owner got blackout treatment on the grille, front end, windshield molding, wiper arms, backlight, and outside mirrors. Special paint tape treatment was given to the hood, roof, deck lid, and lower body, and a distinctive fuel cap and performance-look wheels got the nod. With not a single lick of real performance hardware, the Stallion Maverick sticker package died quietly after 1 year. 1978 Ford Fairmont. One of the most wildly popular old Ford cars today is the Fox body Mustang. Notwithstanding this moniker, there were other Fox platform cars besides the Mustang. Beating the Mustang to market by a full year was the Fox body Ford Fairmont, the replacement for the Ford Falcon. When the Fairmont bowed in 1978, it was a further evolution of Ford's forward-thinking, lightweight unit body construction. Mostly forgotten today, the Fairmont was the beginning of a long line of compact rear-drive cars with McPherson strut suspension, available V8 power, and a live rear axle, among them the Mustang, the aero-enhanced Ford Thunderbird and Mercury Cougar, and the Lincoln Mark 7. Though the Fairmont is considered dull and is seldom remembered today due to its humble family car beginnings, it was the springboard for most of the Ford performance revolution that came to pass in the 1980s and 1990s. 1980 Ford Courier. Riding the wave of imported compact trucks of the 1970s and 1980s, the Ford Courier was a rebadged Mazda B-Series truck that sold in high numbers between 1972 and 1982. In spite of a 25% chicken tax tariff on light trucks imposed by Lyndon Johnson in 1964, mini trucks, as we've come to call them, became a staple of inexpensive and economical transportation, with imports like the Chevy Love, Mazda B-Series, and Toyota Hilux competing for market share. Between 1972 and 1982, Mazda built the Ford Courier mini truck as a cab chassis, sans truck bed, so that it could be imported with only a 4% tariff, after which a bed would be added in the U.S. to complete its construction as a domestically built vehicle. Pressure from the UAW would eventually bring this process to a halt across most domestic brands, and the chicken tax loophole was eventually closed in 1980. Today, the Mazda-sourced Ford Courier mini truck has largely been forgotten by everybody except mini truck enthusiasts, and examples are rarely seen in the wild. 1982 Ford XP. It was built on Ford's North American front-wheel drive Escort platform between 1982 and 1988. Mercury also had the XP, but it was called the LN7 and was only built from 1982 to 1983. Its small scale and sleek design promised excitement, and if you squinted just a little bit, you could pretend it was a new Porsche sports car. Perhaps the XP's biggest mistake is that it was so good-looking that it inherently overpromised on the most reasonable performance expectations. Designed to compete with cars like the Pontiac Fiero, Honda CRX, and Toyota MR2, the EXP was an abject failure as a performer, and in its top variant, the EXP Turbo Coupe of 1984 could only muster a 0 to 60 time of 9 seconds, thanks to a 1.6-liter turbo producing just 120 horsepower. 1984 Ford SVO Mustang.
The new Mustang SVO, the machine, speaks for itself.
By 1984, the world was beginning to figure out performance in a new regime of low emissions and high efficiency. This new world performance order, driven by displacement bans and tariffs in Europe and Japan, was similar to the muscle car era, yet was decidedly more responsible. With Americans hungry for high-tech performance from overseas, Ford endeavored to give the Mustang a more European flair with Ford's Special Vehicle Operations version, sold from 1984 to 1986. Under the hood was a fuel-sipping single overhead cam 2.3-liter inline-4 that put out 200 horsepower thanks to electronic fuel injection and intercooled turbocharging. The SVO not only had power, but was fuel-efficient too, and it could handle and stop thanks to an overdrive 5-speed manual transmission and first-ever standard 4-wheel disc brake system. As good as the SVO was, it still wasn't as fast or as cheap as its 5-liter powered Mustang LX and GT siblings, and was doomed from the outset to play a secondary role,